Okay, shall we then make room for Vishal? Vishal, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so except for some 5 minutes winding up at the end, the rest of the time is yours.
Okay, I will start sharing my screen. Can you confirm if you can see my screen?
I can.
All right. Okay. So this is a topic that is very sensitive for both Hindus and Sikhs. A lot of Hindus feel betrayed that Sikhism is today a separate religion, whereas a lot of Sikhs get very offended when Hindus patronizingly say that Sikhs are a part of Hindu religion. The fact is that Sikhism is today the fifth largest religion in the world.
Vishal, can you put it in the view, change the view more to full
Yes,
screen?
yeah, just a minute.
Slideshow mode, yeah. Bottom right, to the right.
Yeah, there's something popping up on my window which is not. Just a minute. I can do it this way probably.
You can do it on the top also.
Yeah. There.
Thank you.
All right. So there are 25 to 30 million Sikhs in the world today, and that's almost twice the number of Jews. I personally feel that it's the right of every community to define themselves, and if the majority of Sikhs think of themselves as a separate religion, that's their prerogative. However, in scholarly writings, there are multiple views offered on the exact relationship between Hindus and Sikhs. The view which is being promoted very strongly these days in the Sikh community is that Sikhism was a new revelation right from the beginning. So Guru Nanak Ji was born in 1469, and after his travels, he had a revelation that he disappeared in a tributary of the Bias River for 3 days, and when he came out, he said there is no Hindu and there is no Muslim. Uh, a proper interpretation of that would be that human beings inherently don't have a religion, and that's what Hindus also believe. But the Sikhs today and the Akali interpretations will say, well, that meant that Guru Nanak rejected Hinduism and Islam and said that we are Sikhs. And we'll come back more to those kind of interpretations. The second interpretation is, and this is a typo here, that Sikhism is an amalgam of Hinduism and Islam. And this is a version that you find in many books, and it is again quite offensive to the Sikhs. It gives the impression that there is just no originality in the teachings of Guru Sahiban, and it detracts from the beauty and the uniqueness in the Guru Bani. The third view is that Sikh Panth evolved from Nirgun Bhakti and the Nath traditions, and this is a view which in modern times has been promoted by scholars like W.H. MacLeod, also called Hugh MacLeod, and some of his students, not all. And that eventually it became a faith that developed more and more features which are not mainstream Hinduism and evolved into a separate faith in the last 150 years. The fourth, which is a very minority view, is that Islam is actually a sect. Sikhism is actually a sect of Islam. Shri Ram Swarup wrote this seminal booklet called Hindu-Sikh Relationship, in which he explores some examples where Sikhism is treated as a sect of Islam. And this happened not just in British times or by colonial authors. Even today, there is an attempt by certain scholars to say that this is actually true. There's a lady scholar named Dominique Silla Khan, And she argues that the Sikh gurus are actually secret Nizari Ismailis, and she sees Nizari, sect in everywhere. She even says that Mahamati Prannath, who propagated the Krishna Pranami Sampradaya, was also a Nizari, and that the Sampradaya itself is a form of Ismaili Islam. Well, I mean, that's a prerogative. The fifth view is that even today, Sikhism is a sect of Hinduism. This is a view which a lot of Hindus subscribe to, and there are still some Sikhs, and I've come across them, who state that we are Hindus. So we'll explore, I think, the first view and see how views like 3 and 4, I mean, how much validity they have. So now, as to the first view that Sikhism was a new revelation right from the beginning, one only has to look at relics that have survived from the times of Guru Nanak and which are said to have belonged to him. So in 1700s, the descendants of Guru Ram Das, after whom the big schism happened in the Sikh community, they set up a Pothi Mala Sadan in the district of Firozpur. And they had inherited these relics from the times of Guru Nanak. And even today, there is an annual fair where the surviving relics are displayed and offerings are made. So one of the most prominent relic which disappeared in a train robbery in 1970 was the Pothi, which was said to be, said to belong to Guru Nanak himself. And there are Sikh historical records which say that every time the Guru passed on the baton to the next Guru, there was a ceremony where the Pothi and the Mala were ceremoniously handed over to the next Guru. So the Pothi is shown in the top left picture. And before this Pothi disappeared in the train robbery, uh, images, photographs were taken by scholars, Gyani Gurudit Singh and many other scholars. What we see is, and at the top, bottom left is the facsimile of probably the first page, is that, a lot of Sikhs say that, well, we believe in Ek Onkar, and Hindus say Om. And so we emphasize Ek to distinguish ourselves from Hindu polytheism. But if you look at the Harsahai Pothi photographs, Guru Nanak Ji uniformly used Om. And the Ek Omkar really became prominent in the Kartarpur Pothi, which is said to have been compiled in the time of Guru Arjan Dev. So if Ek Omkar is a marker of Sikh separateness, well, obviously it was not present in the Pothi of Guru Nanak Ji. In the middle top and on the top right, we see the Mala, which Guru Nanak Ji had. As anyone can see, it has Rudraksh beads in it. And like I said, it's called the Pothi Mala Sadan. But on the bottom right, there are some other relics from Guru Nanak's time. One is a precious stone called the Padam, the cream, the beige, white colored. But on the right is a Shaligram that belonged to Guru Nanak Ji's family. So that lends some support to the theory that Guru Nanak Ji was a Vaishnav. Once again, typically when people think of Vaishnavas, they always feel that it's a worship of murtis of Rama and Krishna. But even within the Vaishnav tradition, there were Nirguni streams. So the other alternate theory is that Shri Guru Nanak was or had a strong influence through inheritance or the traditions of the time, but that his views were very strongly Nirgun Vaishnavite in flavor. So in conclusion, what we see from these relics is that, at least Guru Nanak, the claim made that he started a completely different religion from Hinduism is not supported by relics that, and these pictures are found on the web, and anybody can look at it. Now coming to the Pothi Mala Sadan, and these frescoes date from the 18th and the 19th centuries. And this is actually true for a lot of the old Gurudwaras. If you enter them, Their imagery, the frescoes depict Hindu deities. So you can see Bhagwan Shiva, you can see Brahmaji, you can see Krishna, and on the bottom left, you see an image of Guru Nanak in the company of other gurus and Hindu sants. Today, in the name of in the name of renovating a lot of gurudwaras in the last few decades, a lot of these frescoes have been whitewashed, or they have been actually replaced by so-called Sikh art, in which Krishna, Rama, Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva are absent, and all we see are frescoes depicting the gurus and other purely Sikh themes. So this brings me to the Guru Granth Sahib, which is now the eternally installed Guru for the Sikh community. If you don't know, it's a massive scripture of 1430 pages, and all printed editions are identical. So if I were to refer to a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, I would say chapter 5, verse 15. But anywhere in the world, when you have the Guru Granth Sahib in a Gurdwara or at home, or when you see any scholarly work or traditional scholarship um, referring to any Bani, they will say, page number 530, Rag Bilavalu, and, and so on, Mahlu 5, which means, that this is from this Rag Bilawal and it's from Guru Arjan Dev and it's on page 520. So that's the uniformity with which the all the printed editions are created, because the Guru Granth, since the time of Guru Gobind Singh Ji's uh, demise, is considered the embodiment of the Guru. Interestingly, the writings included are those of first five Gurus. The ninth Guru were added by Guru Gobind Singh, who prefaced it with a shlok. It adds, a lot of Sikhs are very proud to say that this is a very universal scripture, because it has a Bani of 16 Bhagats and Sufis. These days the word Sufi is very fashionable. So if you really look at the writings, 13 are clearly Vaishnav Bhagats, and the other three who are stated to be Sufis are Baba Farid, Kabir Das Ji, and Sheikh Bhikan, who's all often said to be a disciple of Kabir Das Ji. Now, another misconception about the Granth is that it's in Punjabi. Well, it is not. The language can best be characterized, especially the language of the first five gurus, as Sadhukari, with the influence of Punjabi and Persian. As we move from Guru Nanak, who made a lot of journeys into Pakistan, Central Asia, Afghanistan, the loan words from the Farsi language go on decreasing. And in this massive scripture of 1430 pages, there are just about 1,000 Persian loan words, which are predominantly related to power, royalty, trade, and commerce. And this is a reflection that there was Islamic domination in that region for at least 3 to 4 centuries when Guru Nanak Ji appeared. And we can see actually parallels in Rajput and Maratha records, where Persian vocabulary is used quite frequently for terms relating to royalty, sovereignty, and politics. So the language of the Guru Granth is predominantly Sadhukari, or the Sant Bhasha, which is also used by other Nirgun saints. And as we come to Guru Ramdas Ji and Guru Arjan Dev Ji, the fourth and the fifth Guru Saiban, there is a discernible influence of Braj, which actually goes increasing. And when we read the Bani of Guru Tegh Bahadur, it is quite pure Braj. Guru Gobind Singh Ji, whose Bani is compiled in the Dasham Granth Sahib, is predominantly in very chaste Braj language, with a few Farsi compositions added. These Banis are set to 31 ragas of Indian music. And again, this is touted as a unique feature of the Guru Granth. But if you look at the collections of other Nirgun saints, for example, the Panchavani collections, and those predate the Guru Granth Sahib, they are also set to the ragas. Likewise, the compilations of Sant Surdas and other Vaishnava sons, they also exist from pre-Guru Granth Sahib times, and they are also set to different ragas. So far from being a Punjabi Granth, it actually was an encyclopedia of um, these sons who lived in Western, Northwestern India. Um, and Punjab is referred, not at all referred to actually in the Granth. Actually, India is referred to 4 times. So what I'm trying to say is that the argument that by writing the Guru Granth, the Gurus established a separate faith is very it's, I would say, it's a tunneling of vision. There were similar Granths of other sampradayas. Um, Actually, if you go to southern India, they were the Divya Prabandhams written, like 600-700 years earlier. So, so like I said, there were Panchvani collections already in existence for Nirguni sons. Similar collections existed for a mixture of Nirgun and Vaishnav sons. There were other Grantha collections of different sampradayas, and just creating a separate Granth is not a marker of a separate religious identity. Uh, what we see is that in the Granth, there are many passages which are now interpreted quite differently by modern Sikh scholars to project their new identity. One of them is, Na Hum Hindu Na Musalman and Allah Ram Ke Pind Pran. So what Guru Arjan Dev, concludes this is by saying that Kahe Kabir so Mahe Bakhanu. So he says that Kabir has stated this truth, and I say the same thing. In modern Sikh literature, the last sentence is typically omitted, and all that they say is we are neither Hindus nor Muslims. There's a typo there again. And what they interpret this to mean is that we are not Hindus, we are not Muslims, and so we are a separate community, the Sikh community. But in reality, if Guru Arjan Dev is quoting Kabir ji, and these words or similar words are actually found in Kabir Granthavali Pad 338, it means that Kabir Das ji is saying, I am not Hindu, I am not Muslim, and I am a Sikh, which is absurd. Some scholars like Pashora Singh argue that Guru Arjan Dev ji slightly changed the text of Kabir Granthavali to emphasize that we are a separate religion. But the fact is that the Kabir Granthavali itself exists in multiple recensions, and Guru Arjan Dev might have used one and not the other. So, and the printed Granthavalis, might follow one recension, which is different from the one that Guru Arjan Dev Ji had access to. We see a similar variation in the text of other Banis. For example, there's a very famous Pada Surdas Ji, Tajo Man Hari Vimukhani Ko Sang. Guru Arjan Dev Ji quotes this as Chhada Man Hari Vimukhan Ko Sang. So the thing is that these were banis, these were sant literatures which were propagated a lot orally. People wrote them down from memory, and so they were replaced with synonymous words or with slight textual variants. And one cannot use that argument to say that the Granth marks a separate, Sikh identity. The other argument suggested is that the Gurus invented a new script, the Gurumukhi, to write their Granth. And Guru Anga Dev Ji is often credited with inventing this script. This argument is also we should reject historically. Well, first of all, and the second part of the argument is that the Guru specifically rejected the Hindu Devanagari script for and invented the Gurumukhi. Well, first of all, we've seen that the Guru Granth Sahib is not a Punjabi scripture, and ironically, the oldest Punjabi text available is Ekadashi Mahatmya, which is as Hindu as it can get to be. The most Punjabi influence we see in the Guru Granth is actually in the Bani of Baba Sheikh Farid. And now scholars have looked at the archaeological evidence. There's a brick from Gurdaspur. There are manuscripts from before the times of Gurus, which show that Proto-Gurumukhi had already existed. As the Sharda script spread from Kashmir to the plains of Punjab and the Himachal hills, it eventually, the version in the Himachal hills started diverging from Sharda. And in the plains, we see the Takari or the Mahajani script, which led to Proto-Gurumukhi. And then that finally got standardized into the Gurumukhi that we see in the Sikh literature today. if you look at that Har Sahai Pothi from Guru Nanak's times, or pre Adi Granth Pothis from the times of Guru Amar Das, you see a script which is more similar to the Proto Gurumukhi. So to suggest that Gurumukhi script is a marker of a separate Sikh identity is not a very valid argument. Um, all the 10 gurus were Khatri Hindus, or rather, if you don't want to use the word Hindu, they were Khatris who used the largely consonantal Mahajani script or Takari script, and that is where the Gurumukhi script evolved from. So, again, this argument does not really have sound academic legs to stand upon. Um, Now, coming back to the three Sufis, Sheikh Farid, Sheikh Bhikan, and Kabir Das Ji, how Hindu really is their Bani incorporated in the Granth? I have quoted some lines from Sheikh Bhikan's Bani here. He says, Lord Ram, Banwari, Hari. There are two padas of Sheikh Bhikan and they are as Hindu as they can get. So while Sheikh Bhikan might have been born as a Muslim, the Bani that the Gurus have included in the Granth is purely Hindu Vaishnav in character. Likewise, when you look at Sheikh Farid, a Sufi saint's Bani, or there is no typical use or no typical Sufi terminology in all the passages quoted. Coming to Kabirji, I don't even know how Kabirji can be designated as a Sufi or a Sikh or a Hindu. And I know it's very fashionable and the trend is not very new. Many decades back, Rabindranath Tagore published an anthology of translation of some Kabir Das Ji's writings, and he depicted Kabirji as a Sufi. Um, Today, I mean, actually, a few years back, somebody even told me a revelation that Mirabai was also a Sufi. And especially if you're from Delhi or surrounding areas, Sufism is a big fad. There are Sufi festivals. Some of my own relatives attend those. But, if you look at the historical evidence to see if Kabir was ever considered a Sufi, and I apologize, this picture is not very good. There is a book which has a painting from the mid 17th century, so around 1650 or a little later, uh, and it actually shows Prince Dara Shikoh meeting with the Jogis, the Bhakats, and the Sufis. And the way this painting is done, all the Sufis are sitting on one side, and all the Bhagats and Jogis are sitting on the other side. The interesting thing to note is that uh, Sant Dadu and Kabir Das Ji are shown seated with the Bhagats and not with the Sufis. So the argument that Guru Granth Sahib incorporated the writings of uh, the Sufi sons to show its to show their universal character. The devil is in the details. When you actually read that Bani and look at the historical evidence, this argument is not very sound. There is nothing particularly Islamic in the Bhagat Bani in the Guru Granth Sahib. Actually, if you look at the Bani of Bhagats like Namdev, you will find some Islamic terminology in there. The other argument that a lot of Sikhs today state is that the Gurus freed the Sikhs of Brahmanical patriarchy and caste hierarchy. Today it's very fashionable to blame Brahmins for everything, um, and they are responsible for all the evils in the remaining 97% of the Indian society, which I don't know how it's possible. But coming to patriarchy, there is not even one sentence in 1430 pages of the Granth which is authored by a woman. There are some non-canonical versions of the Guru Granth Sahib, like the Banu, bead, and then sometimes I believe even in the Kartarpur manuscript, there is a line or two by Mirabai. So again, a Hindu woman saint contributed a line or two, which was expunged from the Vulgate Guru Granth Sahib, the Dandama um, edition, which is now used in the Gurudwaras. People often cite a verse by Guru Nanak. The Janam Sakhis also give the background about it, where he praises the role of women as the mother and says that Maharajas, Rajas are born of, emperors are born of women, Except the Lord, nobody has a mother. All relationships are because of, the woman. And so that's taken as a proof that Guru Nanak had rejected Brahmanical patriarchy. But if you read the Adi Granth, there are many passages which are very discomforting. In typical Vaishnava literature, the Devi Bhakts are asked to stop the worship of Devi and turn to Hari. Along those lines, the Gurbani says that people who worship Mahamaya are reborn as women, as if being a woman is a curse. True bhakts are like the subservient wives. There is even a bani which says that a pregnant mother, that a true a person who does the simran with full bhakti is like a pregnant mother who is full of hope and expectation that a male child will be born to her. And the line further says, because she knows that the male child, the son, will take care of her in her old age. So, this kind of uses that traditional or cultural norm of preference for a male child. The Anand Karaj Act was passed in the early 20th century. And it uses, when the Anand Karaj is done, we have, the Lava hymns being recited. Today, the claim is made that those hymns were composed by Guru Ram Das Ji for his own wedding. But if you read the Anand Karaj Act, and the recitations, it says that the woman should accept the husband as her sole protector and object of love. If monogamy reflects women's equal women rights, in the Sikh tradition itself, Guru Har Gobind and Guru Gobind Singh Ji had 3 wives each. Some modern Sikh apologists are very uncomfortable with that, and you find all kinds of explanations. One explanation I have read is that in the case of Guru Har Gobind, the 2 names are actually the maiden and the married name of the same lady, and the third lady was not really the wife of Guru Har Gobind Ji. But if you read the Guru Bilas literature, I mean, it's very clear that Guru Har Gobind Ji and Guru Gobind Singh Ji had 3 wives each. In the Sikh tradition, there is a category called the Panjamel, or the 5 categories of people whom all Sikhs should avoid. One of them is Kudimar, or people who indulge in female feticide. If you read an explanation for this term in the modern Sikh literature, it is always said to refer to some Hindu group, like the Mohoyal Brahmins or the Hill Rajputs or the Rajputs of Punjab. Uh, Ironically, I don't understand why this is true, because female feticide was prevalent in other communities of the Sikhs too, who are not dominant in the Sikh Panth, like the Jats. If you read the gender ratio numbers from the Indian census, of all the religious communities, actually it is the Sikhs who have the lowest gender ratio. I think the average from the 2011 census was 933 for the whole country, and the Sikh gender ratio was actually even below 900. Uh, Coming to casteism, all the 10 Sikh gurus were Khatris. In Punjab, they had a status which was probably more elevated than that of Brahmins, because in addition to being orthoprax, they were also uh, quite wealthy because of their engagement with trade and commerce. If the gurus rejected the caste system, we don't really see intercaste marriages in their families. They married their children to other Khatris. In recent times, when Dr. Ambedkar was approached by the Sikhs because he wanted to leave Hinduism, the Sikhs said, well, why don't you and your followers convert to Sikhism? And Ambedkar ji refused, and he said, well, you haven't shunned casteism yet, and there is discrimination against Mazhabi and other lower caste Sikhs. It is common knowledge that many gurdwaras in Punjab are caste specific. Even when you go to England, you have the Ramgarhia gurdwaras, and then you have gurdwaras which are patronized primarily by Jats. So to say that the Gurubani completely got rid of casteism is not true. It is true that the gurus really downplayed the role of caste in spiritual and worldly matters, but they did not completely reject. And their own family marital relationships were established with other castes like Khatris, or they even got proposals from Brahman families. This brings us to the Granth of Shri Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So there's another massive text called the Dasham Granth, which today has 1420 pages in the standard edition. Um, and the controversy about its authenticity is really very recent. If you look at old pictures, there's a picture in Patwan Singh's book, The Sikhs, where Maharaja Ranjit Singh has a darshan of the Granths which are displayed to him. And you see that both the Granths, the Guru Adi Granth and the Dasham Granth, were displayed, although the Dasham Granth was always placed lower than the Adi Granth. So there was no controversy about its authorship. Why is the authorship of the Dasham Granth controversial today? And the reason is that it has very longish compositions, the Rama Avatar, the Krishna Avatar, Var Chandidi Var. And so a lot of the Akali Sikhs are very uncomfortable because they think that, the Gurus only wanted us to worship Akal Purakh. There is even a section which starts with Pratham Bhagavati Dhyaye. It says that first we should meditate on Bhagavati, and then we should meditate on Guru Nanak and then Guru Anga Ji. Now, the modern Sikhs say that by Bhagavati, the Guru Gobind Singh did not mean Devi. He only meant the sword. But when you look at passages like this and the actual wording of the Chandidi War and other sections, this is a very doubtful interpretation. Another reason why a lot of Sikhs are uncomfortable with the Dasham Granth, and again this brings us to patriarchy, is that 1/3 of the Dasham Granth has about I think 400 or so sections called the Charitropakhyan. In colloquial Punjabi, we say, to stereotype women as scheming and plotting. In our families, we say, oh, that's Triya Charitra. That's the guiles of women. And so that is what the Charitropakhyan actually deals with. Story after story, some of them have a semi-erotic content. Women are shown as scheming, plotting, and but interestingly, there are a few pakhyans, very few, which refer to traditional Hindu revered figures like Radha. And what I noted was that all of those small section of the upakhyans are very respectful in nature, and in those women are not depicted in a negative way. The like I said, the printed edition of the Granth has 1420 pages. But the reason for that is that the printed editions were all based on a very small subset of manuscripts, which were found in a small area of Punjab. Recent research by Gurinder Singh Maan and others has shown that there are manuscripts in the writing of Guru Gobind Singh Ji himself from his times, like the manuscript in Patna Sahib Gurdwara, his birthplace, which has some additional compositions. So one of them is the Ugradanti Stotra, which is quoted very frequently in RSS literature for obvious reasons. The other is a rather longish commentary, verse by verse commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and it's called Gobind Gita. None of the printed editions of the Dasham Granth include the Gobind Gita. Some of them include other compositions called Asphotak Chand. One of them has a very famous line, and it was made famous by a Bollywood song of older years, Mittar Pyare Nu Hal Murida Da. So these are considered genuine compositions if you look at the manuscript. The reason why Ugradanti Stotra is referred to multiple times is because twice in that stotra the Guru says that I have come here to stop the slaughter of cows by the Mughals, and then he says I will protect the Hindus and I will destroy the Turk. If you look at the modern interpretations by scholars like Kamal Sarup Singh or others, you can search the internet. It's very interesting. They say that the Gurus did not specifically object to cow slaughter here like the Hindus. When they use the word cow, they actually meant the weak and defenseless, which is quite ingenious. And the other interpretation of Kamal Sarup, actually the interpretation of Kamal Sarup in his translation of this stotra is that the Guru Gobind Singh Ji was not Islamophobe, because by Turk he did not mean Muslims, which is again very ingenious, because if you look at the Bhagati literature, the pair of Hindu Turk is used right from the times of Kabir Das Ji, or maybe even earlier, to designate Hindus and Muslims for the reason that the primary invaders of Muslim faith in India before the Mughals were called Turks or the Turushkas in the Sanskrit literature. So I mean, I'm giving examples of how words of their own granths are being twisted today to conform to the modern fads, modern politically correct theories, and also to distance Sikhism from Hindu Dharma. Again, another argument made is that when the Guru Ram Das ji established the Ramsar and the Harmandir Sahib was constructed, that was a new place of worship for a community that they wanted to be different from the Hindus. And I don't find that explanation very ingenious, very convincing either. Because when you look at the Sikh tradition, there is Bani in the Guru Granth Sahib, and he says, this area of Ramsar is a blessed area where Ram Raj will be established, and people will not have to pay the jizya tax. Now, how Sikh does it get? I mean, it's as Hindu as it can. And then Guru Arjan Dev Ji compares the Har Mandir in the middle of the tank to Vaikunt, where Lord Vishnu resides on Sheshashaya in the Kshir Sagar. So, that you can connect the dots that it's called Hari Mandir, the term of God, which is most frequent in the Guru Granth Sahib, occurring almost, I believe, 9,000 or more times. And the Golden Temple in Amritsar, which is compared to the Vaikunt. How are Sikhs depicted in early Islamic literature? So Abul Fazl's Akbar Nama refers to a meeting of Guru Arjan Dev Ji with Akbar, and he terms the Sikhs as Brahmanical. Emperor Jahangir wrote his autobiography, and he refers to Guru Arjan Dev Ji as Arjan Mal very disparagingly, and he calls him a Hindu leader and says that he ordered a torture and execution for two reasons. Only the second reason these days is highlighted by the Sikh scholarship. But the first reason that that Jahangir gives is that Arjan Mal was a Hindu who had misled a lot of Hindus, and his shop had been running for some generations. This is the language he uses. And that some foolish Muslims had also become his disciples. So if the scholars like Pashora Singh say, oh, Jahangir was a very liberal emperor and he left the religious preachers alone. So this is not the real reason why he could have, really persecuted Guru Arjan Dev Ji. Well, Jahangir did patronize some Sufis and Jadrub Gosai, Hindu sons, but he was completely intolerant of Muslims becoming Hindus and any Muslim preachers, Hindu preachers converting Hindus to Islam. A case in the point is that when he was traveling through the area of Bhimbar, which is now in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, he discovered that intermarriages between Hindus and Muslims are very, very common. But he was horrified to see that there were some 400 Muslim women who had married Hindu men and had converted to Hinduism. And he ordered all those Hindu men to either divorce their wives or convert to Islam. And the records show that about 400 Hindu men and families had to convert to Islam as a result of that order. There's a third very detailed account, Dabistan, by a Parsi convert to Islam. And he personally knew the sixth and the seventh Gurus, Guru Har Gobind Ji and Guru Har Kishan Ji. He does not explicitly say that the Sikhs had left Hinduism, but he does mention that Sikhs rejected Avatarvad. They used Vaheguru. They did not observe caste hierarchy because many, Khatris and Brahmin Sikhs could be subservient to Jat Sikhs. He mentioned that they did not worship Murtis, that they were monotheistic. But he also acknowledged that the Gurus did honor the avatars and the Hindu saints, but considered them as creations of the Akal Purakh. Interestingly, he also mentions that Guru Nanak Ji wore the sacred thread, which is very interesting because modern Sikh literature points to the Janam Sakhi, which says that when Guru Nanak Ji was taken for his thread ceremony, because he was a Bedi Khatri who wore the sacred thread, he refused and said that he wants not a cotton thread Janeu which will wither, but he wants an internal Janeu which can really transform and elevate him spiritually. But here we have accounts which, the author of Dabistan uh, got from Sikhs he met and from the Gurus, which said that Guru Nanak Ji actually wore the sacred thread. Um, he met with Guru Har Rai, and he mentions quite clearly that Guru Har Rai moved to territories which were ruled by the Hindu Raja of Sirmaur. And interestingly, when Shah Jahan occupied that kingdom in Himachal, Guru Har Rai moved to another kingdom, which was still ruled by the Hindu rulers. The point I'm trying to make is that very frequently when the Sikhs were pressed, they found shelter in territories where the Rajputs and other Hindu kings still ruled. And the reason for this was obvious. They did not see the Hindus as their adversaries, and the Mughals and the Muslims were their prime adversaries in the Sikh community. How are the Sikhs mentioned in the early Hindi literature? Um, Guru Nanak Ji is mentioned as a Vaishnava saint in Bhakti anthologies like Bhakta Leela Amrit. Today, if you read the Sikh literature, they will make big deal. Oh, he's not mentioned in the Bhaktamal of Nabhadas, and so even the Bhakta saints considered them the gurus as non-Hindus or non-Vaishnavas. But actually, there are multiple anthologies of biographies of Vaishnava saints which mention Guru Nanak as a Vaishnava sant. Interestingly, the Bhavishya Puran, as it's printed, has a Pratisarga Khand, which brings the history of India right to the times of Queen Victoria. So we don't know when this Pratisarga Khand was actually compiled. The manuscripts haven't been studied, but it actually mentions Guru Nanak as a Vaishya of Panchal Desh who spread bhakti even amongst the Mlechas. So forget about the vernacular literature. Even the Sanskrit Puran mentions Guru Nanak as a Vaishya. One of Guru Nanak's commentary was, the Gosai Sampradaya, which was established in the Gujranwala district. One of their descendants is actually a friend of ours here, right here in Minnesota. And they had a Granth, which is called the Gosai Guru Bani, which starts with Amritvani, just like the Guru Granth Sahib starts with Japji. And so in the Amritvani, their founder mentions a meeting with his contemporary Guru Nanak Ji and says that you and I belong to the same, vocation. We are spreading the same message. So there are many examples. There are heretical Sikh communities which are today considered non-Sikhs, like the Udasis, who trace their spiritual lineage to Baba Shri Chand, the elder son of Guru Nanak Ji. In Punjab, because of Islamic invasions, Hindu learning was extinguished quite a bit. And actually, it was only the Udasi Deras, which were the repositories of Sanskritic and other Hindu learning. We find hundreds of manuscripts of commentaries or translations of the Bhagavad Gita, even Hindu mathematical works in the Udasi Deras. Not many people know that one of the gurus of Swami Ramakrishna Paramhans, who was Totapuri, was an Udasi, Dashnami sadhu. And actually, even Swami Virjanand of Swami Dayanand Saraswati was an Udasi, sadhu. Another heretical sampradaya of Sikhism, who's also included in the Panjamail, was the Meena. And so this was started by Pirthia, who was the older brother of Guru Arjan Dev Ji, and he was very upset that their father Guru Ramdas Ji selected his younger brother Guru Arjan Dev Ji to succeed him. So they established a parallel Guru Gadi, and they wrote considerable literature. So the question is, how does this sampradaya connect to Hinduism? And Mihirvan, wrote a very massive Janam Sakhi of Guru Nanak Ji and a lot of other literature. His descendants, Harji and Chaturbhuji, actually wrote commentaries on Hindu Vaishnava scriptures also, and they gave pravachans on them. And Mihirvan, from his description of Ujjain, Kashi, it's very clear that he had actually visited those places. So whether we look at the Orthodox Sikh Sampradayas or the so-called heretical Sikh Sampradayas, their relationship with the Hindu community was as if they are part and parcel of the larger Hindu community. So many other examples can be given, but what exactly have been the effects of Sikh separatism? I don't want to dwell much on Punjabi Suba or Khalistani terrorism, but interestingly, if you read the traditional Sikh literature, the enemy is the Delhi Sarkar, the Mughals, and now they have, transformed that hated Delhi Sarkar to the government of Delhi, especially during the time of Indira Gandhi. I still remember as a child, I saw a poster outside a Gurudwara in Model Town in North Delhi, and it treated Indira as an acronym, starting I for idiot. And it ended with a couplet and said, Hitler ki maa ne Bharat mein janam liya. So that was the kind of rhetoric that was used. And, Indira Gandhi's government was likened to the Mughal Sarkar of Delhi. But if you have to distance yourself from Hindu Dharma, a corollary is that you start adopting the Abrahamic framework. And that is something Conrad Elst has also elaborated in his, We Are Not, Who is a Hindu, in the chapter of Sikhism. Um, Very interestingly, some of the modern scholars of Hinduism, they declare the gurus as prophets and the Bani is the revelation. Um, in a lot of Abrahamic faiths, dissension or difference of opinion or interpretation was violently stamped out. And that is the way the Sikh Panth has also taken. There were riots and violent conflicts between Akalis and Nirankaris in 1978. Actually, our neighbor, who was a Nirankari, prominent Nirankari of Delhi, was killed in one of those riots. His son was of my age, so I knew him. And during the Ram Leelas, every year we used to go to their home to borrow swords for use in the plays. Another, like I said, the Dasham Granth has been downgraded. There is a subset of the Rahit Maryadas or the conduct of the Rahits, which is very closely aligned to Hindu practices. Those have been rejected. Many passages of Adi Granth are reinterpreted. Very interestingly, some Sikhs, have even gone to the extent of rejecting very Hindu doctrines like rebirth. And I've given an example of Kala Ghana. Subsequently, he was declared an offender by the Akal Takht. The Sikhs have even come up with a new calendar, which they call the Nanak Shahi calendar. They want to replace the Vikram Samvat, which is used to set the dates for Sikh festivals. And, there is still a lot of opposition to adoption of the Nanak Shahi calendar, but the trend is that both the calendars are listed in parallel. I think it's a matter of time when the Sikh community will eventually just, reject the Vikrami Samvat and switch all their festivals to the Nanak Shahi calendar. Uh, some Sikhs even argue that Hindus are vegetarians, whereas we are not vegetarians. And the traditional stereotype about Punjabis that they are eating butter chicken all the time, which is totally false. If you look at the surveys on the extent of vegetarianism in different parts of India, you will be surprised that the Sikh majority state of Punjab is number, I don't know, 2 or 3. According to surveys, 50 to 60% of the population of Punjab is vegetarian. And yet, to the hatred of so-called Hindu customs is so great among certain sections that I have even come across news reports where some hot-headed young Sikhs have said that we should start serving meat in the langars. Right now, the langars are totally vegetarianism, which they blame on Vaishnava intrusion and influence. And some of them have even said that we should serve beef. So that's the extent to which we are not Hindus, argument has gone. I've already mentioned how the Hindu themed frescoes are being whitewashed and replaced with, Sikh art. You can only show Guru Nanak Ji with Mardana and Bhai Bala and other pure Sikh art patterns. Um, a lot of the Sikh traditions themselves and doctrines have been rejected thanks to the narrow Akali interpretations. Um, there is the oldest tika on the Guru Granth Sahib is the Farid Kot Wali tika. Even that is not read very much these days because a lot of the writing in the Tika, which started in mid 19th century, because of the norms of that time, it has a lot of passages in the Braj language, which is an unacceptably Hindu language today, I guess. Uh, there's been mindless opposition from certain Sikhs to Hindu causes, and I'll discuss more on the example of Ram Janmabhoomi in California textbooks. A lot of the Sikhs who are not necessarily Akali, Khalsa, or Nihangs, they have been declared as non-Sikhs, or they have been um, marginalized or humiliated, put down so much that these communities have started considering themselves as Hindus. A prime example is Nanak Panthi Sindhis, who don't follow the 5Ks, and today almost uniformly they consider themselves as Hindus. They have some very unique customs. They install the murtis of Guru Nanak in their gurudwaras. They perform an arti, just like we perform an arti in temples. The Khatris and Aroras, and that includes many of my own family members, we have become Sikhs. My own two of my great grandmothers were Sikhnis, but all of their descendants are Hindu Vaishnavas. Um, but on the other side, a lot of the rural elements in the Punjab population have switched from getting their ceremonies performed by Brahmins, and they've switched to the Sikh sacraments. And an example is the Tarkhan community in the Patiala region. Uh, Divorced from the well springs of dharmic spirituality, unfortunately, now we are seeing a rampant conversions to Christianity in rural Punjab. A very interesting phenomenon that I see among certain Sikh groups is to appropriate Hindu practices and declare them as Sikh. In 1995, when I was a student in Florida, my roommate registered for a class on yoga, and the instructor for that class was a Caucasian Sikh lady who wore white attire and white turban. So she belonged to the 3HO of Yogi Harbhajan Singh, their tradition. After one class, he dropped out because he was very upset. He said, the instructor told me that yoga was invented by Guru Nanak ji, and before the yoga asanas, she asked us to chant, mantras like Om Guru Nanakaya Namaha. And he said that I'm a Hindu and I just cannot accept it, and so he dropped that class. So this is a real example which I know personally. um, so I had given an example of how certain sections of Sikhs mindlessly oppose any agenda or any activism which is perceived as Hindu nationalist or Hindu. One is the example of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. There was a prominent presence of Sikhs in supporting the Shila, in performing the Shila Pujan, and even during the recent Bhumi Pujan on the 5th of August. But nevertheless, there are scholars like Surinder Kaur and Sher Singh who wrote books like the Secular Emperor Babar. Well, if Babar was secular, then what do we call Guru Nanak Ji, who called, there's a section of 4 Banis in the Guru Granth called the Babar Bani, and I've just pasted some sections. Guru Nanak Ji laments that Babur was a merciless killer, a looter. His army, ravished women, and he utterly ruined the Hindu as well as the Muslim society of Hindustan. So if Emperor Babur was so benevolent and he was so secular, what should we think about this Bani of Guru Nanak? Or what should we call Baba Shri Chand, his oldest son, who in his writings has said that all the Mughals, Tughlaqs, Khaljis, Lodhis, Sayyid, Suri dynasties were very oppressive and violent towards Hindus. Actually, in this Bani, if you can look at the picture on the lower left corner or read the translation, he specifically mentions the destruction of Ram Janmabhoomi, Krishna Janmabhoomi, and how the Shivaling of Kashi Vishwanath was hidden in a well. And so if Babur and the Mughals were so nice, then what do we call Shri Chand? Uh, Interestingly, when we come to the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, one of the first litigation when the British came into political power in Awadh happened when a Nihang and his followers stormed into the Babri Masjid, and they forcibly evicted the Muslims and stopped the namaz. They erected a Nishan Sahib outside the Babri Mosque, and the Nihang scribbled Ram Nam with charcoal all inside the walls of the mosque, and he started a puja and havan every day. An FIR was filed against the Nihang by Muslims, and he was evicted. But he did not relent. He went to the Ram Chabutra, and he started performing the puja and the havan there. So this is the legacy of Sikhs in the liberation of Ram Janambhoomi. And so it is very unfortunate that some Sikhs, either under the influence of Akali politics or under the influence of secularism, want to oppose the Ram Janambhoomi movement. Here's another example. So in 2005, 2006, and also from 2016 to 2017, the Hindu advocacy groups in California asked the Board of Education of the state to improve the presentation of ancient India and Hinduism in the textbooks. Hinduism was predominantly described as a faith which is ridden with casteism, which is which suppresses women, and which is very Brahmanical and very oppressive. One of the additions that the textbooks made was a section on Sikhism. Now, how did those textbooks describe Sikhism? You can see it's pitted against Hinduism as if it's an improvement over Hinduism. So Guru Nanak was a social reformer who challenged the authority of Brahmins and casteism. And then if you read at some other passages or edits which were proposed by the Sikhs, they said that Hinduism oppressed women, whereas Sikhism gave an equal status. And the education board set up committees to review different proposed textbooks. The most widely textbook used in California is by Harcourt Publishers. Unfortunately, on that committee, the only Indian representative was actually a leader of a Sikh advocacy group. And she and that committee injected 300 plus edits in the textbook, mainly in the sections on India, and they were very demeaning to India and Hinduism. Well, fortunately for us, the Board of Education thought that they were really overstepping the limits, and they rejected the textbook completely. So that objective failed. But what I'm trying to explain here is that whenever Hindu advocacy groups have tried to improve the presentation of Hinduism in the textbooks, they face opposition not only by Islamists, the evangelists, and the ex-Hindu and Christian Dalit groups, but also by Khalistani groups. And interestingly, there is also the Ravidasiya group who really opposed the Hindus in 2005 and 2006. But this time in 2016 onwards, their opposition was quite muted. And the reason for that is that Ravidasiya no longer today consider themselves as Sikhs. In the year 2009, some Sikh militants murdered the Ravidasiya Guru while he was giving a sermon in a Gurudwara in Vienna. And the Ravidasiyas decided that they will never be treated as equal. And so the Ravidasiyas decided not to read the Guru Granth Sahib any further in their places of worship, and they will only read the writings of Guru Ravidas and some other sons. And they declared their sampradaya as a separate religion. So maybe because of that, they were not that vocal this time in 2016, 2017. So, this brings me to back to what I had said. There are multiple views on Hindu-Sikh relationship. And the first view really, which I discussed, doesn't have much justification to be accepted. There is hardly anything of Islamic content in the Sikh scriptures other than a few loan words who are very well integrated into the Sikh philosophy. There is quite a bit of truth in the statement that Sikhism evolved from Nirgun Bhakti, other Bhakti, and the Nath traditions, but now it is a separate religion. So we cannot really say that Sikhism is now a sect of Hinduism. The shared heritage is being practiced by both Hindus and Sikhs even today. During Hindu festivals, I often see some Sikhs visit our local temple here, and likewise Hindus continue to visit the Gurudwaras. You can see Sikhs in pilgrimage centers of the Hindu community like Haridwar and Vaishno Devi. Um, a Khatri Sikh would rather marry a Khatri Hindu than a Jat Sikh. So there is still a roti beti, relationship between the Hindus and Sikhs, and no matter how much a section of the Sikhs emphasize on their separateness, it is my firm belief that the Hindus and Sikhs will continue to live like brothers, because a complete split between the two communities is impossible. So that's all I had to present. It's a topic on which one can speak for hours. I have compiled notes which go beyond this presentation, and I will send them to Conrad Elst within a day or so. But now I can probably take some questions.
Firstly, Vishal, I forgot to thank you, Conrad, for a very perceptive presentation on Ram Swarupji. Thank you. But coming to Vishal, enjoyed your presentation very much and learned a lot. This is a subject very close to my heart. And so I'll raise 2-3 points that I think you are well aware of, because you've studied the subject so well. But even so, to know your reactions. Firstly, I'm not sure that the Hindu-Sikh divide would have taken the kind of shape it did had Swami Dayanand Ji not initiated Shuddhi campaign. It was a very insulting term. It started with trying to bring back Ghar Wapsi of Muslims, but then he extended his generosity to Sikhs and called them even Punjabi was, Gurumukhi was described in very derogatory terms by him, and also got the Hindus of Punjab. You see, and then from there on, the Jansangh and others picked it up, whereby Hindus of Punjab started declaring Hindi as their mother tongue to distinguish themselves from Sikhs in order not to be swamped by the Sikh, the Akalis. And only Sikhs ended up owning Punjabi. So the disowning of Punjabi by Punjabi Hindus also marked a very major schism point. And in the process, of course, the Punjabi Suba was truncated and Haryana got separate. So the Sikhs got a smaller version of Punjabi Suba, and the Hindus became a permanent minority in Punjab, which they wouldn't have been if there was a united Punjab, including Haryana and the neighboring areas. Now that's one part. So Swami Dayanand's role is very crucial, because he indulged in a lot of insulting remarks against Sikhs and the Sikh Gurus. The Bhasha was upbrunch, polluted, so he wanted them to purify their language. That's one. Secondly, I'm sure you're aware of it, but for the benefit of others, the role of the Congress party and now even BJP in making the Sikh Panth get narrower and narrower. See, the problem is for me not that Sikhs want to define themselves as separate. But I'm sorry, every Punjabi, I would say every Hindu considers the Gurus as their own. I don't want to be deprived of that right. And the Akalis have no right to deprive me of my right to the connection with the Gurus, which is what they do. And the Congress party obliged them generously by enacting amendments to the SGPC Act, whereby Sahajdari Sikhs, that is those who don't keep a beard and turban and the 5Ks, were declared as non-Sikhs. They don't have voting rights, if, for example, in the SGPC election. And Narendra Modi government drove the last nail in this coffin by an amendment in the first term, in Modi's term, where he made this schism. And actually, Sahajdharis protested, but Modi government didn't listen. They obliged the Akalis because they thought they were going to get some big bonanza in Punjab due to the electoral alliance, which is now in shreds anyway. So the role of politicians in not only driving a wedge between Hindus and Sikhs, but even Sahajdhari Sikhs, which were in a way a link to, so that you couldn't distinguish one or the other. And in many families, up to my mother or grandmother's generation, every Punjabi Hindu family would have one son given to the gurus, so to speak. And in my house, Ramayana part was as common, for example, as Guru Granth Sahib part. Now, the third important point, which I think needs to be also as a political strategy point needs to be addressed, which is that the Indian state has created so many incentives to be a minority, to be Hindu bash, to bash Hindus, to bash Brahmins. The only minority, if you ask me, effective minority today, and the most despised minority is the Brahmins everywhere, you know, and it's so much demonization. It's actually numerically also a minority. But this minority has to be demonized, and through it, anti-Hindu fury unleashed. And the advantages, the incentives that come with Hindu bashing, it's the best career option. You start bashing Hindus and you get the best of jobs in American universities, in European universities, even in Indian universities, where the left reigns supreme. And the left actually is a front for Christo-Islamists. So the Congress party initiated this and has created incentives. You know, in the previous session, Conrad, you were talking about how each group went, everybody wanted to be declared separate. Even I want to convert, become a Buddhist, because honestly, I'm tired of being the so-called majority, which is so disadvantaged. If the Indian state were to reverse the incentives and the minorities were to actually get the deal that they do in many other countries, and the majority were to have substantial advantages, I bet they will crawl on their knees and come and beg to be taken within the Hindu fold. I mean, no other state has acted in this vicious manner against its own people and allowing the Break Up India forces to acquire such eminence. Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you. So, you know, right after this conference, Madhuji, I will send you the draft that I was compiling for Conrad-ji. And I have actually sections on all of these three points that you made, but because of shortage of time, I didn't have slides on that. Now, coming to the Arya Samaj, Swami Dayanand Saraswati ji used extremely intemperate and intolerant and insulting language against the gurus, the Granth, and the language. He called Guru Nanak ji Dambhi, you know, arrogant. And he says that the Sanskrit shlokas in, you know, the Guru Granth reflect that their knowledge of Sanskrit was imperfect, but he did not realize that Sanskrit was the colloquial Sanskrit language used in Northern India at that time. He misquoted the Guru Granth and other scriptures. For example, he quoted a line, you know, Ved Padat Brahme Janam Gavaya. And so what it means is that the Brahma read the Vedas and he, you know, still did not gain anything. What he did not realize that this was an allusion in the Guru Granth Sahib to the story from Srimad Bhagavatam, where Brahmaji, whose four faces represent the four Vedas, stole the cows of Krishna. And so that was the context. When he went to Amritsar, and you know, if you read Pandit Lekhram's Jivan Charitra of Swami Dayanand Saraswati, he started criticizing the Harmandir Sahib. He said the Sarovar is so dirty, the Sikhs and the Hindus tonsure their hair, and the water is so dirty that I'll not even put my feet. The Nihangs got very upset, and for a while there was a threat that they might come and kill him. So he himself in his own lifetime did not perform any Shuddhi of the Sikhs. It was sometime around 1900 when, and you were talking about the Hindu-Arya Samaj relationship. Initially, the Sanatani Hindus were so upset with the intemperate criticisms of the Puranas and other classical Hindu facets that there was a saying in the Sanatani Hindus, Samaji se to namaji achhe.
हाँ, सही बात. I'm
And
well aware of this.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you talk about the shared heritage that people have. So like my nani's mother was a Sardarni, and my mother was born right outside the Golden Temple.
Mhm.
And it's a tradition in our home, in our puja ghar, we always have a picture of Babaji, which
Mm.
you would, know it means Guru Nanak Ji.
Mm.
And a bead of Guru Granth Sahib is always there. There is one on my bedside table. My wife, for many, many years, she would read a Dukh Bhanjani before going to bed. So it's a part of our family tradition. And any affront to the Gurus, like what you read in the Satyarth Prakash and other writings, is an insult to our heritage. And
Yeah.
we are Hindu. So it was in 1900 when some Arya Samajis were approached by the Rahata low caste Sikhs from rural Punjab in the Jalandhar district. And they said, the Sikhs ill treat us. Why
Mm.
don't you Aryas make us full-fledged Arya Samajis and give us the Janeu?
Mm.
And there was a lot of opposition both from Hindus and Sikhs, but nevertheless, the hot-headed Arya Samajis went ahead,
Mm.
and it was a very humiliating sight. The Rahatas were brought on stages and they were tonsured in front of horrified Hindus and Sikhs.
Mm.
And that was a very triggering event. And soon after that, we had the Anand Karaj Act, we had the Shri
Yeah.
Guru Prabandha Committee Act. So the role of our, even in 1970s, when there were conflicts between Akalis and Nirankaris, even then the Arya Samaji leadership
Yeah.
started issuing statements supporting the Nirankaris. So yes, the Arya Samajis, and we shouldn't blame the British. They pushed out
Yeah.
Sikhism of Hinduism. Coming to the
And yeah,
political,
one. Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I'll wait for you.
Yeah. So then you mentioned about the political aspects, and the fact that it's not very beneficial to be a Hindu in India these days. I have dwelt on that aspect in my write up. I've kind of working on it, but it's a fact that Indira Gandhi propped up Bhindranwale because she couldn't defeat the Kalis in the Punjab, and she also propped up uh, certain Sikh leaders who were not very well respected. And even after Operation Blue Star, I remember they had the Akal Takht rebuilt by Baba Santa Singh, but the Sikh community did not accept it, and they had it demolished once again.
Yeah.
So there's a very vicious role which the Congress government played in distancing the Sikhs from the Hindu community. Ironically, today the Punjab government is led by Captain Amrinder Singh. And look at again the divisive politics being played. Captain Amrinder Singh opposed the CAA, and soon thereafter, when the daughter of the Granthi of Nankana Sahib was kidnapped and forcibly converted to Islam, and recently the daughter of the Granthi of the Panja Sahib Gurdwara was kidnapped and again converted to Islam. And when the Sikhs and Hindus were butchered in the Gurdwara attack, I think in March in
Mm.
Kabul, all of a sudden he is asking the Indian government to issue long-term visas, which the Indian government did to, save the Sikhs of Afghanistan. So there's a lot of this dirty politics, the role of Arya Samaj, which has alienated the Sikhs. Anybody would get very upset about it. But, like Conrad said, as Hindus, we cannot disown our heritage, in which we count the Bani of Gurus and their traditions and their teachings, and any affront to them is an affront to us.
Yeah, because see, even Gurbani, all of it, apart from the Dasham Granth that you talked about, it's full of Ram Nam. It's full of Ram Nam. I mean, from beginning to end. And where does this Ram come from? Also, till Govind Singh Ji, all the earlier gurus have Hindu names.
Yeah.
So this Singh uh, became a liability for them because it's now become a statement of separatism just
So
because.
my in-laws are Sahajdari Sikhs. They are
Mm.
Khatris. And in my mother's and side also, we have a lot of Sikhs, like two of my great grandmothers, who were both orphaned during the Spanish flu pandemic, and then they were adopted and married into Vaishnava families. But anyhow, that's a family memory. So we read the Sukhmani Sahib very frequently, and the lines of those shabads are ingrained in our memories. When the Sukhmani Sahib, Guru Arjan Dev Ji, quite in the beginning, not exactly in the first lines, he invokes the authorities of the Hindu Shastras, and you mentioned Ram Nam. He said, Ved Puran Simrat Sudhakar Kine
Yeah.
Ram Nam Kakar. And then he closes the Sukhmani again with the words, Simrat Shastra Veda Vyakhyani. So he's appealing to the authorities, the Smritis, the Shastras, the Vedas, and they say that in the end, what they say is the Ram Nam, and that is what we should, smaran all the time.
And Guru Gobind Singh was a Devi Upasak. He went to war every time after doing offerings to the Devi.
So there are
Chandi
three.
Ki War, for example,
There are three
is a martial poem.
There are three accounts of the formation of Khalsa, and one of them very clearly mentions that the Devi appeared and blessed Guru Gobind Singh Ji. If you see a lot of the old manuscripts and paintings and frescoes of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, he's shown as worshipping the Devi and bowing to him. Interestingly, the Dasham Granth and even with this, other texts that I mentioned are not the only compositions of Guru Gobind Ji, because towards the end of his life, he moved down to Nanded, where he gave up his, mortal coil. And there he composed a Granth named the Sarvaloho Granth, which till recently was was the possession of the Nihangs, and they forbade printing it. They didn't allow anybody to study it, but recently it has been printed. And again, if you look at the sections, it's as Hindu as it can get. Where Lord Vishnu is being requested to incarnate and save Dharma and everything. So, when people start separating Sikhism from Hinduism, they forget that the Vaishnava Bhaktas were not either Nirgun or only Sagun. Surdas ji was a Nirgun in his earlier life. Then he became a Sagun Bhakta. Bhagat Namdev, whose Bani is incorporated in the Guru Granth Sahib, he was a Nirgun as well as Sagun. Ramanand ji is considered the founding Acharya of both the Nirgun and the Sagun Bhaktas. So this division, even, it's a degree of emphasis.
Yeah.
So when we apply that model of, the larger Hindu society, Hindu tradition to the Sikh Granth, that model alone can make sense of the diversity of thought in the Guru Bani. The first Guru, Guru Nanak ji, said that Bhagat Prahlad was saved at the age of 5 by Lord Vishnu. And going down to the 9th Guru, whose Bani is included in the Guru Granth, Guru Tegh Bahadur ji recalls that Ganika was uplifted by Krishna. He talks about Sudama, he talks about Ajamil. All these narratives are from the Bhagavad Puran. If the gurus only worship Akal Purakh, then what is the sense of having these, examples? It's just decorations in the text. And why are they so frequently cited? So all one can say is that just like one can either emphasize Nirgun or one can emphasize Sagun, but the two are not entirely separate. The Sikh gurus emphasize the Nirguni tradition while also honoring, the Sagun tradition. Otherwise, what would you make out this line from Sukhmani? Jaake, I think it was Jaake Roop Rang Anek. I mean, what would you make sense out of it? So, that's, I totally agree to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Well, I guess in the interest of time, we will have to gradually wind up. There's only very little I have to add here. 1 year from now, on the 16th of October, 2021, it is another centenary, namely of Sitaram Goel. And so, due to circumstances, this will also become a piece completing the present little effort. I hope that by then we can have a normal conference someplace in Delhi, in his own city, and for 2 days, and have more space for everything. There will also certainly be another session on Ram Swarup. So if any of you feels inspired to contribute something, please prepare that. And so then we'll meet again. I will have before then ready a reader of Sitaram Goel, the most important parts of his work. About Ram Sarup, I haven't seriously thought about it yet, in the sense that it seemed to me that his works, well, can hardly be taken apart and the essentials put together, but I'm open to persuasion. And then after that conference, we will also make conference proceedings, both for Sitaram Goel and for Ram Sarup separately.
Thank
Okay.
you. I would now request Ramesh Rao from India Facts to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you, Hari Kiran Garu. Thank you for all the wonderful speakers. But my role today is not to thank all of the presenters. My task is to kind of give a brief overview, summary of what India Facts is going to be from now on, a platform for such conferences, such presentations, such talks. I've been reading recently Harsh and Rajiv's new idea of India. And surely they mention about Sitaram Goel ji and Ram Swarup ji. And interestingly, I think when I read the blurbs at the back, there is Shashi Tharoor saying, where are the intellectuals from the right and so on. And here we are. And India Facts is going to be a platform. And it's very important because I think we have ceded the space. We have been here, but we have ceded the space to the people that you have mentioned, all of you have mentioned. And unfortunately, again, it just, people put me in these WhatsApp groups and email groups. And I have been, aghast to read the kind of support, for example, for Trump, mindlessly rushing in where angels fear to tread. And what happens then is because we have ceded that space, there are these lumpen elements who begin to represent us. And that, I think, is a danger from within our own, Panth. So it is very important, therefore, for us to regain the space, for India Facts, therefore, to provide that kind of platform. And here again, without Hari Kiran's initiatives, we would not be doing all of this stuff. And my role now as the new editor, I'm just getting my feet wet here. But once again, this particular conference shows, the sheer, breadth and depth of the kind of knowledge and information that we have to offer the world. So with that, I hope we will have more and more of this. That we will not just be talking, but that we will be writing and compiling and publishing, and that we will be curating these kinds of digital stuff also carefully, because it's very important. Otherwise, so much of, for example, I have been with, for the last 30 years, some RSS conference or meetings, nothing happens. People meet, talk, and it vanishes into thin air. So it is very important for us, therefore, to use these opportunities to build the kind of stuff that we need to be building. With that, once again, dhanyawad. It's so good to see all of you, so good to hear all of you. And so back to Hari Kiran Garu.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. And I do hope under your stewardship, India Facts will take a completely new role and dimension. Started 7 years ago. It had two editors, Sandeep Balakrishna, who did a fantastic job. And then we had Nitin for 4 years and now you have taken the role. I'm sure it'll be a different flavor. We all know how gentle you are, how sharp your knife is, and how sharp your pen is, and how gentle you are. Simultaneously, you capture both. And I think the leftists of the world will face that in time to come. I was there at the opening, and I was just telling about the way in which this memorial fund was instituted. It started on a mail group, and then Jaggi came and he contributed 10 lakhs, and my good friend DVS, my benefactor, and my go-to person whenever I need help, my dear friend DVS, the very young DVS, he contributed, and on behalf of Indic Academy, we contributed. So eventually we are now trying to, a lot of people have the immense respect both Ram Sarup and Sitaram Goel carry even today in all our minds is something to be felt. And a lot of people have reached out saying that we would like to contribute. So we would be creating a separate trust for that, independently managed trust. And then once we do that, we will make an announcement to facilitate the participation, the contribution and the service that a lot of people want to do through in perpetuating their legacy. I now request DVS to say a few words. He's been very, very passionate about this whole enterprise. DVS, can we see you and say a few words, please? Yes. You're on mute. You're on mute, DVS. You're on mute. Yeah.
Audible now?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm certainly the oldest around here, but I'm an infant in front of all the scholars that I had the opportunity of listening to all afternoon. I've been so enthralled, and I marvel at the depth of knowledge and devotion to this topic. The great inspiration that Ram Swarup Ji and Sitaram Goel have devolved to us and carries on and keeps coming down. And being close to 80 and a latecomer into the polemics of what happens to Hindus and what attacks it and what strains it, I feel rather hopeful and confident that we are going to go further on, given the gathering we have here, and Harikiran keeping on inventing new ways of tackling barricades against the invaders of modern times, and people like Ramesh Rao jumping in and manning stations. And I'm absolutely confident that Hinduism will see its rightful role in the world. And I bow my head in honor and in thanks to all the people who have spared the time this afternoon. And I wish everyone well. And thank you very much. It's been a learning afternoon for me. I'm most grateful. And good night.
Thank you, DVS.
Thank you.
I just want to recognize Madhuji. Thank you so much for your very, very active, insightful participation. It's been very heartening to see you. Also, Shrikantji was here throughout. He just left. Jaggi was also there. We would like to acknowledge their contribution, acknowledge their presence throughout, and of course, they have played a phenomenal role. So, Kei, over to you. Please.
Yes, just a little remark. I just learned that Saroj Goel was effectively here. He attended, but he felt that he had nothing to add anymore after Harishchandra's paper. However, next year, in the conference devoted to his father, he will be the crown witness. So we'll meet him again.
Thank you. So thank you all the speakers and thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you, Harikiranji. And thank you, Ramesh.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste, Conradji.
Namaste.
Thank you very much for this feast.
Yes. This has been K's, I call him fondly K, and this has been K's very, very passionate project. and he needs a special mention. I remember just before COVID, he was here supposed to stay, and then he had to rush back. And we look forward to welcoming you back, Conrad.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Namaste.